from chaos. They build routines and safe spaces because they think staying comfortable is the same as being strong. But the truth is, peace is often just another way to avoid growing. Real strength is forged in the moments you can't control, the moments when everything you trusted falls apart. I read a story about a woman who learnt this the hard way. In 1 year, she lost her job, her relationship, and her sense of who she was. For a long time, she thought she would never recover. But sitting alone in that darkness, she started asking questions she'd spent her life avoiding. She wrote, "I was finally alone with my thoughts, and I realized the life I lost wasn't really mine. It was a version of me built to please everyone else." This is the chaos the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche spoke about. If you don't know him, Nietzsche was a 19th century German thinker famous for challenging every idea society calls normal. He believed that until you face the darkness inside you, you can't create anything real or lasting. He didn't see chaos as a mistake or some kind of punishment. He saw it as a necessary breaking, because only when the surface of your life cracks do you discover what you've actually built inside. Think about the times you grew the most. Was it when everything was predictable and easy, or was it when you felt shattered and lost, forced to rebuild yourself piece by piece? Most people don't want to answer that question honestly, because it means admitting that comfort never made them stronger. It only kept them small. Nietzsche once said, "You must have chaos within you to give birth to a dancing star." He wasn't trying to be poetic. He was giving you a diagnosis. You will never create anything powerful until you face the chaos you keep avoiding. That means you have to let go of the childish idea that your mind will grow just because you repeat feel-good affirmations or watch motivational clips. It won't. It grows when you stop asking life to be easy and start wanting yourself to be stronger. Here's something you can do right now. Think about one thing you keep avoiding, a mistake you can't forgive yourself for, a fear you keep pushing down. Just for a moment, stop running from it. Sit quietly and let it rise. Notice how much energy you spend trying to bury it. Now imagine what you could build if you used that same energy to create something instead of hiding. That's your first step toward a mind no one can break. When you change how you see pain, it stops being an enemy. It becomes your teacher. And most people can't handle this truth, because once you see suffering as a tool, you lose every excuse for staying the same. People will look at you differently when you start walking into the chaos they spend their lives avoiding. Some will call you reckless. Some will say you've changed, but deep down, they feel unsettled because your courage makes them question their own fear. And that's how you know you're on the right path. Imagine a world where everyone only did what was safe and familiar. There would be no progress, no breakthroughs, no genuine strength. Chaos is not the enemy of growth. It's the place where real transformation begins. When you learn to stand in the storm without begging for it to stop, you become someone no one can control. Because while others need life to stay predictable, you know you can survive any uncertainty. Remember this, you don't have to pretend that pain feels good. You don't have to glamorize struggle. You only have to stop pretending it has no purpose. If you can look at your own fear and say, "I'm not running anymore," you've already done something most people will never dare to do. You've stopped being a hostage to your own comfort. And that is where real power begins. Stay with me, because in the next part, we'll talk about redefining strength and why almost everything you were taught about it is probably a lie. 2. Redefining strength. When you hear the word strength, what comes to mind? For most people, it's the same image. a person who never cries, who never shows doubt, who always looks in control. That's the story we're sold. Strength as a mask, a polished image that hides every crack. But real strength doesn't look like that. It never has. I read a post from a man who shared how he believed for years that being strong meant never showing pain. He worked hard, kept quiet, smiled even when he was falling apart inside. He thought that if he just kept everything hidden, eventually the pain would go away. But it didn't. It grew stronger. One day he said, "My whole life was a performance for people who weren't even paying attention." Maybe you've felt the same way. Maybe you learned to fake calm so well that you forgot what it feels like to be honest. This is the brutal truth. Real strength isn't about pretending you're unbreakable. It's about facing what you think will break you and realizing you can survive it. Let that sink in for a moment. Strength is not smiling when you want to scream. It's not nodding politely when your heart is on fire. Strength is looking at the unbearable parts of your life and refusing to look away. Nietzsche knew this better than anyone. He wrote that chaos alone doesn't make you powerful. In fact, chaos without an anchor will consume you. That's why some people fall apart in crisis while others rise stronger. The difference isn't who feels more pain. It's who has built something deeper to hold on to when everything else collapses. Imagine yourself in a storm. Everyone is running for shelter. The rain is hitting your face so hard you can barely see. But instead of running, you plant your feet. You take a breath. You feel the fear, the sadness, the confusion, and you stay anyway. That's the moment you find your anchor. And that's the moment you stop being controlled by circumstances. Here's something practical you can do to start building that anchor today. Think about a part of your life where you feel like you always have to perform. Maybe it's at work, maybe it's in your family, maybe it's online. For one day, practice telling the truth instead of acting strong. If someone asks how you're doing, don't say fine. Say what's real. At first, this will feel uncomfortable, but that discomfort is proof that you're breaking free from the old idea that strength is about looking perfect. The more you practice, the less you'll need the approval of others to feel solid. Here's another example. A woman shared online that after years of trying to be the positive, upbeat friend, she finally admitted she was exhausted and needed help. She was terrified everyone would leave. Instead, her honesty inspired the people around her to be more real too. She wrote, "I thought I had to be the strong one, but admitting I was struggling was the strongest thing I ever did." This is how you redefine strength. You stop measuring it by how much you can hide. You start measuring it by how much truth you can hold without collapsing. Because here's what most people won't tell you. Pretending costs more energy than facing what's real. And the longer you wear the mask, the heavier it gets. When you choose to face the unbearable and come out on the other side, you become someone different. Someone who can't be manipulated by guilt or fear. Someone who doesn't have to prove anything. Someone who doesn't need to be seen as strong because they simply are. Stay with me, because in the next part, we'll talk about what happens when you let go of every illusion and step into the radical freedom Nietzsche called the death of God, and why that freedom is the birthplace of an unshakable mind. If any part of this feels true for you, just type yes in the comments. And if it doesn't, type no. I'd love to know where you're at. 3. The death of God and radical freedom. Most people spend their whole lives believing someone else has the answers. They're convinced there's a plan, a purpose, a higher power that will eventually explain all their suffering. This idea feels safe. It's comforting to think there's a script already written, that no matter what happens, it must be part of something good. But Nietzsche looked at that comforting belief and tore it apart. When he said God is dead, he wasn't celebrating. He was issuing a warning. He was saying, the story you've been telling yourself, that someone is watching over you, that all your pain is justified, that life has a meaning given to you, was never real. I read an essay by a woman who lost her husband in a car accident. For years, she clung to the idea that it must have happened for a reason, that someone, somewhere had decided it was part of a bigger plan. But when she finally admitted she didn't believe that anymore, she wrote, "It felt like the ground disappeared under my feet, but at the same time, I realized I was free, because if there was no plan, I could write my own." That is the moment Nietzsche wanted you to reach. When you realize no one is coming to save you, no one is pulling the strings, and no one is obligated to give your life meaning, you have two choices: collapse under the weight of that freedom, or rise because of it. Let that sink in. Until this point, you could blame something outside yourself for what you didn't change. You could say, "It wasn't meant to be," or "This is just my destiny." But when the illusion dies, all that's left is you, your choices, your courage, your willingness to create something from nothing. This is why so many people cling to ready-made beliefs, because it's easier to be obedient than to be responsible. It's easier to follow commandments than to invent your own values. But here's the truth. That comfort is a prison. When you dare to step outside it, you step into radical freedom. The kind of freedom that makes you dangerous, not just to others, but to the smaller version of yourself you're leaving behind. Imagine standing at the edge of an empty field. There's no road, no signposts, no map. Most people would panic. They'd run back to the safety of the crowd. But if you can take a breath, if you can stand in that uncertainty and say, "I will build something here," you've already become someone rare. Nietzsche believed this is where real power begins. Because once you accept that there is no script, you stop waiting for instructions, you stop asking for permission, you stop believing you need to earn your place in the world. You understand it's yours to define. Try this today. Think about an area of your life where you're still waiting for approval, maybe from your family, your culture, or some invisible authority. Write down one sentence. "No one is coming to give me permission." Then read it out loud. Feel the discomfort. That discomfort is your old self dying. And in that space, something new can be born. A mind that doesn't bend to dogma. A spirit that doesn't crumble without a safety net. A person who can walk into chaos and feel no need to find a savior. This is what Nietzsche meant by brutal autonomy. You don't have to be cruel. You don't have to reject everyone else's beliefs. But you do have to stop borrowing them as a substitute for your own. And when you do, you'll see why most people never become truly strong. Because true strength requires the courage to say, "I am alone, and I am enough." Stay with me, because in the next part, we'll explore how this radical freedom is only the beginning. You'll learn what it means to create your own values, and why that is the most powerful act a human being can ever do. 4. The power of creating your own values. There comes a moment when you realize no one is coming to rescue you. No mentor, no system, no higher power will hand you a clear purpose. At first, this truth feels like a loss. You feel exposed, almost betrayed by everything you were taught to believe. But hidden inside that discomfort is a secret most people never discover. The freedom that terrifies you is also your greatest source of power. I read a story about a man who shared how he grew up in a strict community where every choice was made for him: what to believe, what success meant, what failure looked like. For years, he followed the script. It was easier to feel certain than to feel alone. But when he finally stepped away, he felt like he was floating in space, with nothing to hold on to. He wrote, "It was the scariest feeling I've ever had, but slowly, that emptiness turned into possibility. For the first time, I wasn't repeating someone else's idea of who I should be. I was choosing for myself." That is what it means to create your own values. Nietzsche believed that most people never reach this point. They spend their lives borrowing beliefs because it feels safer than crafting their own. He called this herd morality, the default mindset of the masses who would rather be accepted than be free. But the moment you reject the ready-made rules, you start to become something else entirely. Someone who does not wait for validation. Someone who does not apologize for being different. Someone who is willing to stand alone if that's what the truth requires. Think of the last time you did something simply because you decided it was right, not because it was expected or praised. How did that feel? It probably felt risky. Maybe you even lost approval or respect. But underneath that loss, there was something real, a small spark of self-respect that no compliment can replace. That spark is what you must build on. Try this simple exercise today. Write down 3 beliefs you were given by your family, your culture, or your community. Ask yourself, do I actually believe this, or was I taught to believe it? If your answer feels uncertain, you've just found a place to begin your own path. This is not an easy process. It requires you to break the old contracts you made with your fear. It forces you to sit in the discomfort of having no script. But as you do, something changes. You stop measuring your life by other people's definitions. You start asking a different question. Not, is this acceptable? But, is this worthy of me? That one question will change everything. Most people are terrified of individuals who think this way. Because when you create your own values, you expose everyone who is still hiding behind borrowed ones. You become a mirror that forces them to see what they've avoided. This is why so many will call you arrogant or difficult. But their discomfort is not your problem to solve. It's proof that you are stepping into the kind of independence they can't imagine. Here's what most self-help advice won't say. Living by your own standards is lonely at first. You will lose relationships built on shared illusions. You will outgrow spaces that once felt familiar. But what you gain is worth everything you leave behind. You gain integrity, the quiet knowledge that every decision you make is yours. You gain clarity, the ability to stand in chaos without looking around for permission. And most importantly, you gain presence. A presence that makes people pause, because they can feel you are not playing by the same rules. This is the essence of true power. Stay with me, because in the next part, we will talk about the idea that terrified Nietzsche's generation and still terrifies people today. The concept of the Übermensch, the Overman, the one who lives above every convention. You're about to discover why this idea changes everything about how you see your mind, your life, and your potential. 5. The Übermensch, the Overman. Nietzsche had a name for the person who breaks free from every expectation, every rule, every comfortable illusion. He called this person the Übermensch, the Overman. If you've never heard the term, it doesn't mean a superhero or some perfect being. The Overman is simply the human who dares to create meaning instead of borrowing it. Most people think growth happens gradually, like a slow climb up a safe hill. But Nietzsche believed real evolution comes through rupture, through moments that shatter your old identity and force you to build something new in the wreckage. He called this creative destruction, and it's the foundation of an unbreakable mind. I read a story about a man who shared how he finally stopped living to impress his father. For decades, he measured every success by whether it would make his dad proud. He picked a career he didn't care about. He married someone he didn't love. He spent years pretending he was satisfied. But late one night, after another argument, he sat alone and realized something painful. He wrote, "My entire life was an audition for someone who would never clap." That was the moment he began to change. The Overman does not ask, "Will they approve?" The Overman asks, "Does this matter to me?" If you want to build a mind so strong no one can break it, you must learn to ask that question. Because the Overman does not look outside for validation. He doesn't measure his life by the herd's applause. He creates his own internal laws and lives by them, even when the world disagrees. Think about the areas of your life where you still feel you need permission. Maybe you hold back your opinions because you don't want to offend. Maybe you stay in situations that drain you because you're afraid of judgment. The Overman does not live that way. He does not adapt to the world. He imposes meaning on the world. He does not say, "Is this allowed?" He says, "Is this worthy of me?" Pause and imagine how your life would feel if you could ask that question every day. At first, this mindset sounds dangerous. It sounds selfish. But in reality, it's the most honest way to exist. Because when you stop outsourcing your values, you finally see who you are without the costume. Here's something you can do right now. Take out a piece of paper and write down 3 areas of your life where you feel trapped by other people's expectations. Under each one, write the sentence, "I do not need permission to live my own way." Sit with it. Let it make you uncomfortable, because that discomfort is the beginning of freedom. The Overman is not afraid to stand alone. He does not fear the silence that comes when you stop people-pleasing. In fact, he welcomes it, because in that silence, he hears something most people never do: his own voice. When you see yourself as a creator instead of a servant, everything changes. You stop feeling like a victim of your circumstances. You start feeling like the architect of your life. People will not always understand you when you start to live this way. Some will call you arrogant. Some will say you've lost your way. But deep down, they are disturbed because your independence makes them question their own compliance. And this is the real power of becoming an Overman. You don't need to dominate others to feel strong. You only need to stop letting them dominate you. You don't have to prove your worth to anyone. You only have to be brave enough to live by your own standards. When you do this, your mind stops bending to every opinion and criticism. It becomes self-sufficient. It feeds on the quiet fire inside you, the will to shape reality in your image. Stay with me, because in the next part, we'll explore the sacrifice this path demands. Because becoming the Overman is not free. It requires you to leave behind the version of yourself that still wants approval. And most people will never be ready for that price. But if you are, what you gain is something no one can take away. If this video resonates with you, Or if you see something that could be clearer or more helpful, please leave a comment and share your thoughts. Let me know what spoke to you and what I could improve. Your feedback helps me make better content for you and everyone else watching.